Starting out, we have Ben struggling as Max was trying to do something and Ben actually tries to go hero, but Max stops him. As we then pan down and see that Ben was in an old-fashioned tux with an ugly bow tie to match, along with his hair straightened out looking uncomfortable. Seeing themselves in the mirror, Ben then immediately rips the bow tie off of himself and pulls at the tux, tearing the area around the neck as he then falls to the floor breathing heavily, trying to catch his breath, telling Grandpa Max that thing was too small and he couldn't breathe because of how tight it was, and starts to complain about being in the stupid wedding. Max tells him that tux was a family heirloom and Ben apologizes for tearing it, though he says he had to because he really couldn't breathe as it was too tight. Shaking his head, Max tells him they can get it fixed, and that he's got another tux Ben could wear instead that was a bit bigger. They later are seen checking out the venue as Cousin Joel walks up with his fiancée and greets them, asking if Max could talk some sense into his parents, as his parents then walk up and say the same thing about Joel and Camille. Max asks what exactly was going on as Camille's parents show up, and both sets of parents for the bride and groom to be were openly hostile towards one another. Ben just looks confused but says maybe it won't be so boring as Joel begins to tell them about the stuff that's been going wrong, though Charmcaster offers to help with that, stating that she and Gwen could make sure everything runs smoothly, and tells Gwen it would be a good chance to practice diverse spell ranges because of the different ones they'd need for each different issue the wedding had. Ben asked if they knew anyone else that could be the ring bearer, though Joel says that they didn't, and not to forget about the reception. When Ben asked why, he tells him that he's supposed to dance with the flower girl. Ben immediately looks horrified and says that he doesn't dance. Cousin Joel tells Ben he'd better learn to do so, otherwise he'd end up looking like a mega dweeb in front of everyone, making Ben look worried as he activates the Omnitrix, but Max stops him again, telling Ben he'd be fine. Later on, Gwen was working with Charmcaster to help fix things up, as Ben had said something about going to the lake, but had changed into Buzzshock once he was sure he was alone, and created a clone of himself, telling them to stay in his place as he got out of there. Though the clone grabbed him, saying they weren't about to be stuck at a boring wedding, and the two began to fight. As the two were fighting, a truck had rammed the gate and was about to run straight into the wedding setup, and the two called a timeout before going after the truck and began to blast it with electricity. This caused the truck to explode and the chairs to catch fire. Both of them go, "We are in so much trouble," at the same time, as they then try to figure out some way to get the flames put out and turn towards the lake, getting an idea. We then see a green flash as Cannonbolt then dove into the lake while curled up and causing a massive amount of water to splash and put the flames out. Cousin Joel's parents then point blasters at Cannonbolt, questioning what an Arborian Pellerota was doing there, though Ben jokes that the lifeguards around there were really strict. We see Cousin Joel running up asking what was going on, as his father Gordon had said that this alien was trying to ruin the wedding. Max comes over with Charmcaster and Gwen as Cannonbolt tells them that they were trying to save the stupid wedding, and Max says it seems like he's telling the truth, though Joel's mother Betty says that they better not take any chances, stating that aliens couldn't be trusted, as she and Gordon charge up their blasters with Cannonbolt getting mad. Cannonbolt then yells at the two of them that they sound just like the Forever Knights, and curled up into a ball and began rolling in place, slinging up water and mud at the two of them and covering them completely with it before rolling off underwater, as we see a green flash from the surface. The next day we get Max telling them about why the wedding was so important, how Joel and Camille were basically a modern day Romeo and Juliet, as the families had been warring for ages, with Gwen finding that romantic, and Ben just rolling his eyes. We later see them together with Joel's family and Camille's family being hostile again, well, except for the blonde-haired Lucy, who says that she's excited to be the flower girl, and talking to Ben about how they get to dance in front of everyone, annoying Gwen as Ben just tells her to go away because he does not dance. We get Gwen pouting about how she was supposed to be the flower girl, as one of the caterers says he will not allow Camille to marry a human, and revealed himself to be a living pile of mud, showing the Lonopan true form, as he starts to attack and cause problems. Ben ducks under the table and starts messing with the dial as Gwen says to wait, and reminds him that this guy is a living pile of mud. Ben says, "So?" And Gwen then points out, "So what happens when you bake clay or the sun comes out after it rains?" Ben gets the picture and changes into Heat Blast instead of Diamond Head and blasts the arm of Camille's ex-boyfriend. This caused the ex-boyfriend's arm to dry up and crumple, causing them to drop Joel in the process. When questioning what a Pyro Knight was doing there, Ben says, "Friend of the groom," as the ex-boyfriend then begins to fight with him. Because of Heat Blast burst flames. The fight was in his favor, as every time the X tried to attack him, Ben could simply dry them out, making it more like he was being hit by dirt clods, as he laughed as Gwen and Charmcaster joined in. Gwen says, "Remember the fountain?" And the other two nod as the three all fire off flames, with heat blasts being natural and Gwen and Charmcaster using magic to create theirs. Trying out the X quickly as they try to get away, but basically become baked in place as Joel throws a chair at their head, causing the ex-boyfriend to crumple to dust, with the cleaners walking over with the brooms and starting to sweep them up. Cutting to a bit later on, we see Gwen going into the rust bucket while Charmcaster was in the background talking to Camille and Joel about something as they nodded together, and Gwen walks into the rust bucket, leaving the door to it open, as she saw that Ben was attempting to try to dance on his own, with Gwen teasing him and Ben falling over, telling her this is why he doesn't dance, and she offers to help teach him as she has taken lessons on how to do so. Reluctantly, he agrees and lets her teach him. He was surprised at how easy it was as they were practicing, and they then saw a flash and looked up to see Charmcaster there with a disposable camera. Smirking as they both let go and fall onto the floor, Charmcaster joked that it was a Kodak moment while laughing. We now go on to the wedding, taking place with Joel and Camille at the altar, with Ben in his more fitting black tux, with his hair no longer combed down as the straight hair looked funny on him. Camille's parents attacked the minister during the part about any reason they should not be wed, and started causing problems with some other Lenopans. Camille's father grabbed at Joel, stating that there would be no wedding and no truce, but then Joel started to laugh, as does Camille, confusing them, with Camille telling them that they're too late for that. When asking what they'd meant, Joel says that they went earlier that morning together over to the courthouse and made it official. The two were already married. They were having the ceremony still because he loves Camille and wanted to see her happy on their wedding day. Camille's parents then growl in anger as Charmcaster burned father of the bride's arm with a spell, making it break apart, congratulating both bride and groom, saying that they'd taken her advice and made it official before the ceremony, angering Camille's parents even more, hearing that she'd been the one to suggest it. Max hands over a couple of blasters to Joel's parents, stating that they promised no plumber gear, but he made no such promise, as they then began to fight with Charmcaster and Gwen using magic, and Ben gets an idea, and calls out to the group, telling everyone that wants the ceremony to happen to get under the gazebo. Camille and her little cousin Lucy, along with some others, then got under it, like he'd said to. Then Ben calls out to Gwen and Charmcaster, "These guys are mud, time to rain on their parade." With a nod, Charmcaster uses a spell, making the lake water spout upwards, with Gwen joining her, copying what she'd done to make the spout larger, as they then soak the area with the water, causing the Lenopans to melt a bit, as Ben then hits the watch, changing into Buzzshock, and laughs maniacally, as he then charged up an electric blast and fired it at the ground, causing the soaked area to become covered with electricity as it zapped the Lenopans that were caught in the water, making them melt into a puddle of goo. We finally get the ceremony completed as Ben apologizes to Camille about what happened, though she says not to worry as they'd eventually pull themselves together, no real harm done. We cut to when everyone was dancing and Gwen looking annoyed over at Lucy, who was dancing with Ben, looking uncomfortable about dancing. He still didn't like it. The last scene is of course ending on a sappy note, as it was time to throw the bouquet. Let's end with an overused trope and say Gwen caught the bouquet and looked over at Ben, who took a step back, seeing that Gwen was the one holding it, and began to run off with Gwen chasing him and everyone laughing, having a good time.